What if I told you that the ship resting at the bottom of the North Atlantic isn't the Titanic? We all know the story. An iceberg, an unsinkable ship, 1,500 souls lost in the freezing dark. It is the greatest tragedy of the 20th century. But what if the history books are wrong? What if the sinking wasn't an accident, but a cold, calculated business transaction? A massive insurance fraud orchestrated by the most powerful men in America and England. Look closely. The windows are different. The list is different. The cargo is different. Tonight, we are not just telling a ghost story. We are reopening a crime scene. We are going to prove to you that the ship that sank on April 15, 1912, was not the RMS Titanic. It was her broken, uninsurable sister, the RMS Olympic. Welcome to the greatest deception in maritime history. Welcome to The Switch.
To understand the crime, we first have to understand the motive. And the motive was money, massive amounts of it. The year is 1911. The White Star Line is in a desperate battle for supremacy against their rival, Cunard. Cunard has the speed, White Star needs size and luxury. They commissioned three Sisters of the Sea, the Olympic, the Titanic, and the Britannic. The Olympic was the first, the pride of the fleet, but on September 20th, 1911, disaster struck. Under the command of Edward Smith, yes, the same man who would later captain the Titanic, the Olympic collided violently with a British warship, the HMS Hawke. The damage was catastrophic. The Olympic's hull was breached, her propeller shaft twisted. She limped back to Belfast for repairs. But here is the twist that changed history. The inquiry found the Olympic at fault. This meant the insurance would not pay out. Enter J.P. Morgan, the American tycoon who owned the White Star Line. Morgan was not a man who liked to lose money. He was staring at a financial abyss. The Olympic was now a broken ship. Repairing her would cost millions and take the Titanic's dock space, delaying the new ship's launch. The company was facing bankruptcy. So a plan was hatched, a plan so audacious, so evil that it sounds impossible. But remember, these were men who built empires on risk. The plan was simple: switch the ships. Here is how the theory goes. Both ships were docked in Belfast. They were nearly identical. Only a few feet in length separated them. To the untrained eye, they were twins. The plan? Patch up the damaged Olympic just enough to float, swap the nameplates, swap the lifeboats, swap the linens and the china. The battered Olympic would leave the port disguised as the brand new Titanic. The goal wasn't mass murder, at least not initially. The plan was to sail the fake Titanic to a specific coordinate in the Atlantic, fake an accident, and slowly sink her. A rescue ship would be waiting nearby to pick up the passengers. No one dies. The company claims the full insurance value of a brand new ship, the broken Olympic disappears, and the real Titanic continues service under the name Olympic for decades. It was the perfect crime, or so they thought. But criminals always leave clues. Let's look at the physical evidence. The real Titanic was designed with an enclosed promenade deck on B deck. The Olympic had an open one. Yet photographs of the ship that left Southampton show an uneven spacing of portholes, a configuration that matched the Olympic, not the Titanic blueprints. Even today, underwater explorers have found inconsistencies on the wreck. Some claim that where the paint has chipped away on the bow, you can see the letters M and P form underneath the name Titanic, as in OLYMPIC. Are these just coincidences or evidence of a switch happening in plain sight?
If physical evidence doesn't convince you, let's talk about behavior. Let's talk about the people who didn't get on the boat. J.P. Morgan, the owner of the ship, had a personal suite reserved. It was equipped with a private promenade and a bath designed specifically for his preferences. He was scheduled to be on the maiden voyage. It was the PR event of the decade. But just hours before departure, Morgan canceled. He claimed he was ill. Where was he found days later? In France, enjoying a holiday with his mistress, looking perfectly healthy. And he wasn't alone. Several of Morgan's close business associates and friends also canceled their tickets at the last minute. Henry Clay Frick, Milton Hershey, they all suddenly had other plans. Did they know? Did Morgan warn his friends? Do not get on that ship. It is not meant to reach New York. Meanwhile, J. Bruce Ismay, the chairman of White Star Line, did board the ship. But notice his behavior. While women and children drowned, Ismay found his way into a lifeboat. He survived. Was he there to oversee the operation? To make sure the ship sank exactly where the rescue vessel was waiting?
This is the part of the story that makes the insurance fraud theory terrifyingly plausible. The plan required a rescue ship. You cannot sink a liner full of rich people without a safety net. Enter the SS Californian. The Californian, captained by Stanley Lord, stopped in the ice field just 19 miles away from the Titanic. It sat there, waiting. Unlike other ships that night, the Californian was carrying no passengers. Instead, it was loaded with 3,000 wool blankets and sweaters. Why does a cargo ship need 3,000 blankets, unless it was expecting a large number of cold, wet survivors? The theory suggests the Californian was the getaway car. It was supposed to see the distress rockets and come to the rescue. The passengers would be transferred. The Titanic Olympic would sink. The insurance would be paid, and everyone would go home heroes. But something went wrong. The coordinates were slightly off. The ice was thicker than expected. The distress rockets fired by the Titanic were white, but standard maritime distress signals were usually red. The crew of the Californian saw the lights, but they hesitated. They didn't understand the signal. Imagine the horror of Captain Smith. He knew the plan. He was steering a broken ship to its death. He expected salvation on the horizon. But as the water rose, he realized the Californian wasn't moving. The plan had failed. The calculated fraud had turned into unintentional mass murder.
We know how the night ended. 1,500 people froze to death. But the aftermath is where the conspiracy truly takes hold. The British inquiry into the sinking was largely a sham. Key witnesses were silenced, the logbooks of the Californian mysteriously vanished. And the insurance? White Star Line collected $5 million for the loss of the Titanic. Adjusted for inflation, that is over $150 million today. And what of the other ship, the one they claimed was the Olympic? That ship, which was secretly the real Titanic, sailed for another 23 years. It was known as Old Reliable. It served in World War I. It was eventually scrapped in 1935.
When it was scrapped, workers found paneling with the number 401 stamped on the back. 401 was the build number for the Titanic. The Olympic was 400. Why was Titanic paneling on the Olympic 20 years later? Unless they were never switched back.
While the executives were sipping champagne in first class, a disaster was already unfolding below deck. A disaster that the White Star Line desperately tried to hide. Did you know that when the ship left Southampton, it was already on fire? Look at this photograph taken on launch day. See that dark mark on the hull? That is heat damage. Evidence suggests a massive coal bunker fire was raging in Bunker 6 for 3 weeks before the ship even set sail. This wasn't a small flicker, this was a furnace burning at over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Why does this matter? Because heat changes the molecular structure of steel. Experts believe that the fire weakened the ship's hull by up to 75%. Here is the chilling part. The fire was in the exact same spot where the iceberg struck. If the steel hadn't been brittle from the fire, the iceberg might have just dented the ship. Instead, it tore through it like paper. J. Bruce Ismay knew about the fire. Captain Smith knew about the fire. Yet they ordered the stokers to keep shoveling coal to hide the flames, effectively turning the ship into a ticking time bomb. They couldn't delay the launch. The switch had to happen on schedule. Was the fire an accident, or was it arson? A way to weaken the old, damaged Olympic, disguised as Titanic, so it would sink faster when the accident happened.
If you buy a used car, you test drive it. If you build the largest moving object in history, you test it rigorously. Usually. The Olympic underwent 2 full days of sea trials. It was pushed to its limits. The Titanic? It was tested for less than half a day. Why the rush? Why skip the full-speed tests? The skeptics say the answer is simple. The ship was frail. It was the patched-up Olympic. If they pushed it to full speed during the trials, the temporary patches on the keel might have burst. The vibrations would have revealed the structural damage from the Hawk collision. They needed to get the ship out to sea, crash it, and claim the cash before anyone noticed it was falling apart on its own. This explains why Captain Smith, a veteran with 40 years of experience, was speeding through an ice field at night. He wasn't reckless, he was desperate. He was likely under orders to reach the rendezvous point with the rescue ship Californian before the hull gave out from the fire or the structural stress.
Now, we must turn to the darkest chapter of this conspiracy. The motive wasn't just insurance fraud, it was political assassination. In 1912, a secret war was being fought for the financial soul of America. A group of powerful bankers, led by J.P. Morgan and the Rockefellers, wanted to establish a central bank, the Federal Reserve. But 3 of the richest, most influential men in the world stood in their way. John Jacob Astor IV, Isidor Straus, Benjamin Guggenheim. These men possessed wealth and influence that rivaled governments. And rumor has it, they were staunch opponents of the proposed Federal Reserve. They believed it would give too much power to the banks. J.P. Morgan knew he couldn't buy them, and he couldn't kill them on land without raising suspicion. So he invited them onto the ship. of dreams. Think about it. J.P. Morgan invited them. Then Morgan himself canceled his trip at the last minute. With the unsinkable ship gone and these three titans of industry at the bottom of the Atlantic, the opposition to the Federal Reserve vanished overnight. Just 1 year later, in December 1913, the Federal Reserve was created. Was the sinking of the Titanic actually a high seas execution, a way to consolidate the power of the global elite? When you look at who survived and who died, the statistics are haunting. The first-class survival rate was high, unless you were an enemy of J.P. Morgan.
Let's step back from the politics and look at the hard engineering one more time, because the ship itself is screaming the truth. In the original blueprints, the Titanic and the Olympic had different arrangements for their first-class cabins on sea deck. The Olympic had fewer suites. The Titanic was supposed to be more luxurious. When Robert Ballard discovered the wreck in 1985, cameras went down to sea deck. What did they find? The cabin arrangement on the ocean floor matches the Olympic, not the Titanic. Furthermore, look at the propeller. The Titanic was fitted with a specific pitch of propeller blades to test efficiency, but the wreck evidence is inconclusive and debated. However, during the 1912 inquiry, the crew's testimony about the ship's handling characteristics described a ship that leaned and turned exactly like the Olympic, not a brand new vessel. Every bolt, every rivet, every window tells a story of a ship that had been at sea for years, not days.
If the ship at the bottom of the ocean is the Olympic, then the ship that sailed on until 1935 was the Titanic. Imagine the guilt of that ship. For 23 years, the real Titanic sailed under a false name. It carried soldiers to war. It carried immigrants to a new life, all while its sister lay rotting in the dark, taking the blame for a crime it didn't commit. When the Olympic was finally scrapped, the town of Jarrow, England, bought the furniture and paneling to build a hotel. You can visit the White Swan Hotel in Alnwick today. You can sit in the dining room. And if you look closely at the back of the wood paneling and the mirrors, people have found the number 401. 401. The official hull number of the Titanic. Why would the Olympic, hull 400, be filled with wood from the Titanic, unless the ship that was scrapped was the Titanic? When logic fails to explain a tragedy, humans turn to myths. You may have heard the legend of the unlucky mummy, a cursed Egyptian priestess stolen from the Valley of the Kings, allegedly carried in the cargo hold of the Titanic. Rumor has it, this artifact caused the destruction of everything it touched. One of the passengers, the famous journalist William Stead, actually told stories of this curse to his dinner companions on the night of April 14th. Hours later, he was dead. But here is the cold, hard truth. There was no mummy on the cargo manifest. So why does this story exist? Conspiracy theorists argue that the curse of the mummy was a psychological operation. A story planted in the press by the White Star Line. Why? Because a curse is an act of God. It's unavoidable. It's mysterious. Insurance fraud is a crime. It's dirty. It's punishable by prison. By spreading rumors of bad luck and ancient curses, the company shifted the public's focus away from the coal fire, the broken hull, and the missing safety equipment. They wanted you to look at the ghosts, so you wouldn't look at the ledgers. Let's return to the bridge. The night of the crash. Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee were the lookouts. Their job was to spot the iceberg. But they were missing one crucial piece of equipment: binoculars. They asked for them repeatedly. They were told there were none. But there were binoculars on the ship. They were locked in a cabinet in the officers' quarters. The key to that cabinet was in the pocket of Second Officer David Blair. But here is the twist. David Blair was removed from the crew list at the very last minute, just like J.P. Morgan. Blair left the ship in Southampton, and he accidentally took the key with him. Was it an accident, or was it sabotage? Without binoculars, the lookouts were effectively blind until the iceberg was less than a mile away. If they had those glasses, they would have seen the ice seconds earlier. Those seconds would have saved the ship. Someone made sure the Titanic was flying blind.
Fast forward 73 years, 1985. Robert Ballard discovers the wreck. The world celebrates. But even the discovery of the Titanic was a lie. We now know that the mission to find the Titanic was actually a cover for a top-secret U.S. Navy operation. The Navy hired Ballard not to find a luxury liner, but to find two lost nuclear submarines, the USS Scorpion and the USS Thresher. The Titanic's search was just the cover story to fool the Soviets. Ballard found the subs, and with the extra time he had left, he found the Titanic. But since then, access to the wreck has been tightly controlled. Private salvage rights prevent independent researchers from doing forensic analysis on the hull plates that could prove the switch theory once and for all. Is the government hiding something down there? Or are they protecting the gravesite?
So let's stack the deck. A ship that was previously damaged and uninsurable. A coal fire raging in the hull before departure. The owner and his friends canceling at the last minute. A captain speeding through ice. Lookouts denied binoculars. A rescue ship waiting silently nearby with 3,000 blankets. And a sister ship that sailed for decades with the wrong parts. We want to believe that the Titanic was a tragedy of arrogance, man versus nature, but the evidence points to something far darker. Man versus greed. The Olympic was an economic burden. The Titanic was an insurance payday. The switch was the perfect crime. The only thing they didn't plan for was the ice being harder than the steel. They didn't just sink a ship, they sank the truth.
When the survivors arrived in New York,
The world demanded answers. 2 inquiries were launched, one by the US Senate and one by the British Board of Trade. On paper, this looked like justice. In reality, it was a cleanup operation. The British inquiry was led by Lord Mersey. Remember this name. Lord Mersey was a man with deep connections to the shipping industry. His job wasn't to find the truth. His job was to protect the reputation of the British Merchant Navy and, more importantly, the White Star Line. During the trial, key witnesses were not called. The passengers who claimed they saw the ship break in half, dismissed as hysterical. The lookouts who mentioned the missing binoculars, intimidated. The questions about the switch, never asked. The verdict? Accidental sinking due to excessive speed. Captain Smith was blamed because he was dead and couldn't defend himself. The White Star Line was cleared of negligence. This verdict allowed the insurance companies to pay out millions without asking questions. Interestingly, just a few years later, Lord Mersey presided over the inquiry of the Lusitania sinking. Another disaster, another cover-up. Was he the fixer for the maritime elite? Let's go back to the water for a moment. We all know there weren't enough lifeboats, but have you ever asked why the boats that did launch were half empty? Lifeboat 7 had a capacity of 65. It left with 28 people. Lifeboat 1 had a capacity of 40. It left with just 12 people. Why? The official story is confusion. The conspiracy theory is far more chilling. The crew knew about the plan. They expected the Californian to be right there. They thought they were just shuttling passengers to a rescue ship a few miles away. They didn't pack the boats because they thought they would be making multiple trips back and forth. They didn't realize until it was too late that the Californian wasn't coming. By the time they realized the rescue was a lie, the boats were already gone, and the people left on deck were doomed. If you want to find the truth, follow the people who were there from the beginning. Meet Violet Jessup. She was a stewardess on the Olympic when it crashed into the Hawk. She survived. She was a stewardess on the Titanic when it hit the iceberg. She survived. 4 years later, she was on the Britannic, the third sister. When it hit a mine and sank, she survived that too. History calls her Miss Unsinkable. But skeptics ask a different question. Was she a lucky charm, or was she an operative? It is incredibly rare for one low-level employee to be assigned to the exact 3 voyages where the White Star Mine faced its biggest disasters. Did she know too much? In her memoirs written years later, she describes the Titanic sinking with strange details that don't align with the official narrative. She mentions crew members behaving oddly, as if they were waiting for something other than death. Violet lived to be 83. She took her secrets to the grave. But her presence on all 3 ships links the fate of the sisters in a way that statistics cannot explain. The story of the insurance fraud doesn't end with the Titanic. It ends with the third sister, the Britannic. After the Titanic disaster, White Star Line was in trouble. The Olympic was old and damaged, if you believe the theory. The Titanic was gone. They built the Britannic, safer, stronger. But in 1916, during World War I, the Britannic also sank. It hit a mine, or so they say. It sank in just 55 minutes. The Titanic took 2 hours and 40 minutes. Why did the new and improved ship sink 3 times faster? Some divers claim the damage to the Britannic looks like an internal explosion, not an external mine. Was the White Star Line cursed? Or was the business model simply build, insure, sink, repeat? With the Britannic gone, the insurance payout was once again massive. The company survived the war on the back of dead ships. Today, Belfast is proud of the Titanic. It's a museum, a movie, a legend. But if you walk the docks where these ships were built, you can almost feel the ghosts of the workers. They knew. There were rumors in Belfast for decades that the workers were told to swap the nameplates, that they were threatened with unemployment if they spoke. The Titanic Insurance Fraud is not just a story about a ship. It is a story about the world we live in. A world where the rich write the rules and the poor pay the price. Whether it was the Olympic or the Titanic at the bottom of the sea, one thing is certain: the truth was the first thing to drown.
Coincidences happen. But what happens when a coincidence is so precise it looks like a script? In 1898, 14 years before the Titanic sank, an American author named Morgan Robertson wrote a novella titled Futility. The plot? A massive luxury ocean liner deemed unsinkable crashes into an iceberg in the North Atlantic and sinks, killing almost everyone on board due to a lack of lifeboats. The name of the ship in the book, the Titan. The length of the Titan? 800 feet. The Titanic? 882 feet. Top speed of the Titan, 25 knots. The Titanic, 24 knots. Both ships had a triple screw propeller. Both ships carried around 3,000 people. Both ships had dangerously few lifeboats. And the most chilling detail? Both ships sank in April in the exact same ocean after striking an iceberg on the starboard side. How did a struggling writer predict the biggest disaster of the next century with mathematical precision? Conspiracy theorists call this predictive programming. The idea that the global elite telegraph their plans through fiction before executing them in reality. Was the Titanic sinking a planned ritual? A script written decades in advance? Or was Morgan Robertson simply a man who understood the arrogance of maritime engineering? Either way, the book stands as a haunting piece of evidence that this disaster was expected. Let's leave the supernatural and go back to the shipyard. Because if the switch theory is true, the crime wasn't just about swapping ships. It was about cheap materials. Deep dive investigations into the wreckage have recovered the rivets, the metal pins holding the ship together. The Titanic required 3 million rivets, but in 1911, there was a shortage of high-quality, best iron. Under pressure from J.P. Morgan to stay on budget and on schedule, the builders allegedly compromised. For the bow and the stern, the curved parts of the ship, they used lower quality, best iron rivets, which contained high amounts of slag. Slag makes iron brittle in cold temperatures. When the Titanic hit the iceberg, it didn't just tear open. The impact caused the cheap rivets to snap their heads off. The seams of the ship unzipped. If high-quality steel rivets had been used, the ship might have stayed afloat long enough for rescue. This wasn't an accident. This was corporate greed. Whether it was the Olympic or the Titanic, the ship was built to fail at the microscopic level. J.P. Morgan saved money on rivets, and 1,500 people paid the price. Information is power, and on the night of April 14th, information was being suppressed. We know the Titanic received ice warnings, but did you know about the private messages? There are reports that J. Bruce Ismay, the chairman of White Star Line, who survived, was seen stuffing a telegram into his pocket earlier that day. A telegram from the Baltic warning of ice. Instead of posting it on the bridge for the officers, Ismay reportedly showed it to passengers as a conversation starter. "Look, we are in ice. How exciting." Why hide the warning? Because If the captain slowed down, they would arrive late in New York. A late arrival would ruin the press coverage of the maiden voyage. The arrogance of the executives overrode the safety of the passengers. They believed the unsinkable marketing lie so much that they bet their lives on it. Only Ismay won that bet. The passengers lost. It wasn't just the book futility. Real people felt the darkness surrounding this ship. Dozens of passengers canceled their tickets days before the voyage, citing a bad feeling. One passenger, Major Archibald Butt, a deeply religious man and aide to the U.S. president, wrote a will before boarding, convinced he wouldn't return. And then there is the story of J. Conan Middleton. He was booked on the Titanic but had a nightmare 2 nights in a row of a massive ship floating in the air, with people drowning in the sky. He canceled his ticket. He survived. Was the collective consciousness of the world warning us? Or were there whispers in high society that something was going to happen to J.P. Morgan's ship? When the rich and powerful start canceling trips, you should pay attention.
April 1912. The world was on the brink of war. Germany and Britain were locked in a naval arms race. The Atlantic was a chessboard, and submarines were the hidden pieces. Most historians say the Titanic hit an iceberg, but some survivors told a different story. Vaginak Butakon, a passenger, claimed he heard an explosion before the ship began to sink. Not a scrape, a boom. Other witnesses saw a searchlight in the distance, not the Californian, but a strange, low-lying vessel that disappeared into the dark. Could it have been a German U-boat? If the Titanic was secretly carrying munitions or gold, as some rumors suggest, it would have been a legitimate target. A torpedo impact would explain why the ship sank so fast. It would explain the explosion, and it would explain why the British government was so eager to close the inquiry quickly to prevent a world war from starting 2 years early. Was the iceberg just a convenient cover story for an act of war? Conspiracies are fascinating, but we must never forget the reality of that night. While J.P. Morgan slept in a warm bed in France and Ismay rowed away in a lifeboat, hundreds of third-class passengers were trapped behind locked gates. This wasn't just an insurance scam. It was class warfare. The switch was designed to save money. The lifeboats were designed to save the rich. The musicians played until the water touched their knees. They weren't playing to calm the passengers. They were playing a funeral march for themselves. They knew there was no rescue coming. They knew the game was rigged. When you look at the Titanic, don't just see a ship. See a floating tomb built on greed. Let's look at the full picture one last time. The evidence is overwhelming. Number 1, the motive. The White Star Line was bankrupt. The Olympic was damaged and uninsurable. Number 2, the opportunity. 2 identical ships docked side by side. Number 3, the clues. The uneven portholes. The MP letters on the wreck. The missing binoculars. Number 4, the suspects. J.P. Morgan and his associates canceling at the last minute. And number 5, the result. The insurance was paid, the opposition to the Federal Reserve was eliminated, and the real Titanic sailed for another 20 years as the Olympic. Is it harder to believe in a conspiracy? Or is it harder to believe that a captain with 40 years of experience hit the only iceberg in the ocean on a calm night while the ship was on fire, without binoculars, and with half-empty lifeboats? You decide.
Why do we still care? Why are you watching this video 100 years later? Because the story of the Titanic is the story of our world today. big corporations cutting corners, the rich escaping consequences, the truth buried under paperwork and NDAs. The Titanic didn't just sink in 1912, it sinks every time profit is put above human life. The ship at the bottom of the Atlantic is a monument to the greatest lie ever told. History is written by the victors, but the truth survives in the deep. They switched the ships, they took the money, but they couldn't wash the blood off their hands.
This has been the full investigation into the Titanic insurance fraud. Now I turn the verdict over to you. Was it the Titanic, or was it the Olympic? Did J.P. Morgan get away with murder? Let me know your final verdict in the comments section below. I want to see a debate down there. If this documentary opened your eyes, please share it. The algorithm tries to hide these truths, but you can help spread them. Subscribe to Legender for more deep dives into history's darkest secrets. Until next time, question everything.